Hey everybody, it's me, Dr. Andy Roark, and this is the Uncharted Podcast. Guys, we got a great episode today. We have got a question on price shopping. I can't believe we haven't done an episode on this before, but our writer said you haven't, and I can't remember one. And so we talk about the price shopper. We have got a large animal practice 1 year out, making their way profitable in their first year. Congratulations to them. And they have hired their first employee, which is a big deal. And this employee is struggling with the price shoppers, and we feel like they're maybe apologizing for the prices. And maybe there's good reason for that compared to what other people have charged in the past. But anyway, how do we talk to somebody on the team about not apologizing for prices? How do we help them handle price shoppers? Me and Maria Pirita get into it. Let's do this thing.
And now, the Uncharted Podcast.
And we are back. It's me, Dr. Andy Roark, and Maria Pirita, in case you can't tell.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm great. I am just living my best life up here, so yeah.
Yeah? Oh, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's Florida. It's warm. My dog is on my lap right now, being the cutest little cuddle buddy. And yeah, life is good. What about you, Andy?
That's good. Oh, man. My life is hurtling past. My wife and I, we built a house like 9 years ago. And we have a nice deck that's built onto this house. And it's like up in the air. It's like a second story deck, and it's real, it is. And the company that built our house was a bunch of, I'm going to say doofuses. They're a bunch of doofuses, and they went out of business, so I can't get to them anymore. And they didn't use pressure treated wood on our deck, and now it's 9 years, and it's like falling apart, and I'm having to build a new deck, and I'm like, this is terrible. And if you haven't looked at what decks cost in the modern economy, yeah, they're not. Yeah, why would you? But let me just cut to the chase. It's the stuff of nightmares, and it's just like it's that horrible feeling of like I didn't do anything wrong. Like I trusted a builder that had a reputation that was pretty solid, and I didn't know they were going to go out of business like as soon as they finished the house, but they did, and no one can hear me scream except my wife, who's also screaming, and that's what I'm doing today is shopping for a deck that I shouldn't have to buy, and that's going to it's going to be a whole thing. So anyway, it's a minor issue, I think, in the grand scheme of things, but it's terrible, and it's one of those things where in 5 years I'm not going to remember this, but right now it's just one of those slogging burdens that I have.
Is there any way you could get excited about it? I
have to.
Opportunity to build a new deck, even though it's costing me money.
But that's why you're so great. This is one of the things I love the most about you is look, it's got to happen. And honestly, you flip the switch right there. It's got to happen. It's done. It sucks that it happened. It's unfair, but it's done, and it's got to happen. And I've got to get a new deck. And so I might as well get excited about it. You know what I mean? And so, honestly, when I feel up about it, I go, this is going to be dope. When it's done, I'm not even saying, I think I am going to not try to just get through this, and I am instead going to be I spend a lot of time on that deck. I like sitting outside, and I'm going to look and say, knowing what I know now after living here for almost a decade, what do I really want? And so I will tell you that I have secretly been looking at built-in grills.
I was just going to ask about that. Built-in benches, built-in grills, the canopies that you can get over it, or I don't even know. Maybe they have some new deck technology. Maybe they have a deck that doesn't even get hot.
They have deck technology. It's funny. They'll talk to you about cutting-edge deck technology, and that just sounds ridiculous to me. That's it's cutting edge rock laying. I'm like, it's just they're rocks. You just put them down. Nope. Cutting edge deck technology. So no, it's true.
Something to get excited about.
Oh, totally. No, I'm going to get a drink fridge out there. I'm going to turn this deck into the fort I always wanted to have when I was a kid.
What I'm hearing is you're going to entertain all of us, the listeners included, and have us over on your deck for some parties, some Uncharted parties.
I asked Allison about a fireman's pole. She shut that down.
Oh,
I was like,
no.
How awesome would it be if I could just leave the deck, slide down the pole, and then run to help the neighbors when their house is on fire? Something like that would feed into my hero fantasies.
I have often taken no's as not right now. So
she's not up for the fireman's pole yet.
You might just have to convince her. Like next time she's calling you from the garden and you're like, I need help. Like, it'd be really cool if I had a fireman's pole right here.
I'd be much faster if I had a fireman's pole.
And then take your time going down the stairs.
That's right. Yeah, like very slowly down the steps. Okay. See, this is why you're a problem solver. That's why you're on the podcast. It's why I love spending time with you.
Speaking of problems,
we got a good problem today. It was funny. There's a person who was like, I have looked at all of your episodes as a new practice owner. So in practice, just about 1 year. So shout out, congratulations on that. New practice owner, about 1 year. She's like, I went through all of your episodes and I don't think you have an episode on this. And I find it hard to believe, but also I can't remember one specifically. So maybe that's true. The question from the mailbag comes from a practice owner who just passed 1 year open in her new practice. It's an equine practice, and they just hired their first employee. Hallelujah, that she says. She had previous veterinary reception experience, but in a brick and mortar practice, and we are 100% mobile. We tried really hard to keep our prices manageable, but inevitably a mobile service can't do the economy of scale that you can in a clinic, and we are more expensive than she is used to. We just managed to be profitable in our first year, which we are really excited about, and you should be really excited about it. We have a challenge of being in an area with several practitioners who are retiring, and they have traditionally had very low prices. So there's definitely a pushing the ball up the hill re-education of clients going on. We get a lot, in all caps, of price shoppers, as I suppose most clinics do. Our new receptionist/assistant has been heard several times on the phone, kind of apologizing for our prices. She is empathizing with the costs that the owners are feeling, but we feel this comes across as devaluing our practice and why we are worth what we are worth. How do we change her approach to talking about costs? And so that's the question from the mailbag. I think you are a perfect person to have on to talk about this, Maria. You are so wonderful with clients. You have a ton of CSR front desk experience and also management experience. And so let's start with headspace here. So how do you start to think about this problem? How do we get into a productive place so that we can talk to this assistant/receptionist?
I have two things for headspace that really stick out to me. The first one being that this is a really good problem to have, because you couldn't have a more perfect person for your front desk than somebody who can really be empathetic and kind to your clients in that way, which is really where that's coming from. Yeah. And so remembering that this isn't a character flaw of any kind. This is a receptionist who's going to be really great at her job. She just needs a little fine tuning on this communication piece, which is totally fine. And I think that when we can get into the headspace of, because oftentimes I hate to see things as like, oh, that's just Janet. She's just always like this, right? Yeah. You get this like feeling of this is a character flaw that we can't work with. But in reality, this is a soft skill. And this empathy that they have is going to come in handy a lot in other scenarios. Yeah. In this scenario, it kind of works as against us. But that's totally fine. This is a totally doable thing that we can train and we can coach with. So those are my two main pieces of headspace is, don't look at this as a character flaw. We've talked about the grow model before. Yeah. And this is also somebody sounds like they're perfect for your front desk. And also the trophy. Hallelujah. You're right. You just hired your first employee. It sounds like you're doing great.
For things like this, when it comes to talking about money in general, I think that one of the key pieces that has to be in place is everyone who's talking about money has to believe in the prices. Okay? So what I mean is, if you think that the prices are kind of made up, it makes it really hard to advocate for those prices, to tell someone this is what it costs, and to look them in the eye and to not be ashamed or not be embarrassed. It's like, this is what it is. What really has freed me in talking about pricing was a firm belief that this is what it needs to be. And I can empathize and I can say, I totally understand. I hear that. And also, I don't feel bad. I don't feel any worse than looking and saying, this is what the price of gas is. This is what a gallon of gas costs. I'm like, man, a gallon of gas can be hard on some people. Those prices get up and some people get in trouble. The person working at Verizon Wireless doesn't apologize for what the plans cost. Like, they'll empathize. They'll say, yeah, I get it. Times are tough. This is what our plans are. This is what we have. And I don't know that they get the type of emotional kind of beating that we get. As soon as people feel like you have the ability to change the price, or the price is negotiable, they feel like, well, I'm gonna sort of work on this person. And again, I think people are bad. I think that's just kind of how they've been conditioned. It's just interesting where people choose to share their frustrations about price and where they think that they can kind of negotiate or push back, and where they don't. Like, nobody walks into McDonald's and says, I'm not paying $5 for a value meal. I only have $3. Maybe they do. I don't know. I could be totally wrong. Maybe that happens all the time. But I kind of have a hard time believing it. I have a hard time believing that the person at McDonald's is apologizing for the price of McDonald's. And so anyway, so the two pieces of that is, before you can talk to somebody about appearing apologetic, we need to kind of firm up the underlying sort of conditions so that they don't feel like they need to apologize. And to me, it's like, I think you can always empathize and say, of course we want people to be able to have access to care. And of course I wish everything was more affordable. And at the same time, it's important to me that the team believes, yes, we have set these prices not because we're greedy, not because we're trying to rip everybody off, but this is what we need in order to grow our business, to invest into equipment, to make payroll. Like, this is just kind of what it needs to be. And so the other thing that I would say to this practice owner that's writing in is, from a headspace standpoint, you have to make sure you're leading by example. Mm-hmm. If you want to see your team capitulate and apologize, then you should start giving discounts and you should start cutting prices, because they will see you giving discounts, and then it's going to be really hard for them to act like, yes, these are the prices. And I see that a lot. It really does need to be for everybody. You need to figure out what is a fair price, given what you're doing, given what the economy is now, given what, your concerns about, tariffs and importing equipment that you need. And like, all those things are real. Like, there's a lot of economic uncertainty. You need to try to figure out what your prices are going to be and what they need to be. And then you need to be able to talk with your staff about why that is the way it is, without going in too much detail. But they have to believe these prices are real. And that, like, the biggest mistakes I've seen in practice in the past are when there was a culture where people were able to change the prices, and vets would charge for a half an ear cytology and things like that. And it just underlines the team's entire sense that these prices are real and they are what they are. It feels like everything could be cheaper if we just wanted it to be. And that's where that feeling of guilt comes from, and that's where those conversations come from. And so I would put that forward as sort of one of my big things is we've got to get serious about believing in the prices.
I love that so much, because I do think that and that was part of the action steps. So I won't go into too much detail, but I think that kind of transparency is really important inside of veterinary clinics, because you tend to have people, and this person said that this receptionist came from another clinic. And so if you have somebody that comes from a different clinic and maybe they charge significantly less because their model is totally different than yours, they're going to come into your clinic and think, wow, my last clinic did this for half the cost, right? And I did have that experience in my clinic. So my primary clinic was AHA accredited and fear-free. And so most of you that, are AHA or fear-free, those things will increase the cost of your services because they take more time. Like, a fear-free appointment is going to take a lot more time than one that, holds them down and gets it done. And so when I had, receptionists or assistants that came from other clinics, oftentimes it took explaining all of those things. And your team needs to understand that you're not just charging for the time and the material. It's your service, it's your expertise, it's the convenience. Whatever it is in your model that you're charging for, they need to understand that. And there has to be some sort of transparency. You don't have to talk about the numbers specifically. You can talk about how payroll and all the benefits that we all get to enjoy end up taking 40% of the cost right there. And then the other 40% is this. And then we've got 10%. So you could talk about percentages, but really letting them know why prices are the way that they are and all of the pieces that go into it, because we're not always given that kind of transparency, that level of understanding of where the prices actually come from.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I think the last thing for me is, and I wouldn't say this to the staff, but this is for the people listening. This is definitely for the owner that's listening. What the other vets charge for their services, pardon me, is not your problem.
Yep.
It's not your problem. Like, you didn't set their prices. And, like, I hope this isn't harsh to say, there might be a reason that they're shutting down and not being bought by another veterinarian that wants to take over and run that business. And it's probably that they're not a profitable business and they don't have anything that they can sell. And it feels like that's shade, but it's the sad truth. I see it a lot. And here's the thing. Doesn't mean they're bad people. They could be outstanding veterinarians. I could see living a rich, wonderful life where you run a practice and you operate it and it provides the income that you need for your family, and you feel like you are accessible as you can possibly be, and you have supported your community. And when it's time for you to retire, you close the doors and you shut it down and you go and you retire, just like somebody who had a 9-to-5 or, worked for another company for those years. Having something profitable to sell at the end is nice. It's not required to have a good, rich life. There's definitely ways that people can do this. And so I'm not saying that they're a failure if you have a business that's not profitable. That may be a wonderful thing for them. Their choice in no way obligates you to lower your prices or to set a standard of care that is not the standard of care that you want to set. And again, I wouldn't say it that way to the staff, but I think the people hearing this, I think they need to hear it. You are here to pursue your dream, my practice owning friend. You started this up a year ago because you had a thing that you wanted to do, and you wanted to practice medicine a certain way, and you wanted to live a certain life, and you are making your dream come true. You are not obligated to bend to support other people's dreams that don't have anything to do with you. And so that is just the truth of it. You cannot be all things to all people. And I think I would say that to the staff of, hey, I understand other people charge this. I don't know how they could continue to charge that today. I don't know that. We are a practice that's growing. We are a practice that we need to price things so that we can survive, not just now, but into the future. And so that we can practice medicine at the standard that I believe it needs to be practiced. That's how we set our prices. So I understand that other people, we're cheaper. That's just not what we're doing. I think that level of conviction is probably going to be required, but it's funny. You should not allow your prices to be compared to other people's prices as a benchmark. You should have your prices compared to what your dream is and what you're trying to accomplish. I promise you, the people at AMC, at the biggest, most beautiful specialty hospitals, they are not having meetings and going, what do the other practices in the area charge? Like, they're not having those meetings. You know why? Because they're doing their thing, and they are setting the prices based on what they need to do in order to accomplish their thing. It's like the bougie restaurant in town is using bougie restaurant prices, and they're not worried that they're overpricing relative to McDonald's. It's just, anyway, I think that spending too much time thinking about what other practices have charged and what other people have charged, I think that's a recipe for unhappiness. It's a recipe to compare yourself to others in ways that don't make sense. And it's a good way to make yourself sort of feel guilty. And so anyway, I would gently move the conversation away from what other people charge and say, I understand that. When I'm talking to the staff, I would say, I understand the other doctors charge less. That's not what we're able to do. That's not the type of practice that we're going to run. These are the practices that we're going to run. And so I think you just have to have that thought, and you can't get bogged down in what's going to happen to the clients of other people's practices.
Well, and I think it's such a kind way to look at things, 100%. I am with you on the comparing your prices to other practices. And I do think at some point the clients are comparing your prices to other practices.
Sure.
So you do have to prepare your team to handle that kind of question.
Absolutely.
But I think how you handle that question is extremely important, because I always told my team, hey, there's a time and a need and a space for every type of practice here. If we have a walk-in clinic that charges a little bit less than we do, but they don't have a receptionist answering the phones, that's already one area in which you can tell this is why they're a little bit cheaper. But we don't need to go into other practices. So what I would train my team to say is like, well, I can't speak for those other practices, but what I can tell you is how we do the medicine here.
Yes.
And these are the things that we offer. But I think it's really important, maybe we're getting into action steps a little bit, but it's really important that your team understands how to combat those questions and also how to build that value in your services. Why are your services the cost that they are? And what about them makes them unique or special that other people would be willing to pay those costs or those fees?
Yeah, I think you're 100% on it. I think so. For Headspace, I think I'm going to draw this to a close in that I do think in my experience, we have to do some of these sort of philosophical conversations, because if people are just in the wrong headspace or they're racked by guilt, all of these things are really, really hard for them. If we can frame this up around, this is what we need to do. Our prices are set for a reason, and like we believe in them. These they mean something. They're not made up willy-nilly. And also, we are building our dream, and we're going to practice medicine the way that I believe it needs to be practiced. And we're going to practice this higher standard of care. And again, no shade on what other people are doing, but this is our medicine. This is our way. This is how we're going to do it. And these are the prices that we need to have in order to deliver the service that we want to deliver. I think that is a very clear, solid building block for you to stand on. And if you don't have that, there's just this nebulousness. So I think you got to lay that price. These prices mean something, and they're real and they're tangible. I think you have to lay that down first, and you have to live it and manifest it and make those prices real, make them tangible. And then the other part is we cannot be all things to all people, and we're not going to compare ourselves to other people. And I think that those are just two good aphorisms that we can hold on to and we can sort of use. And so I think that's it for Headspace. And then after we've laid these pieces down, I'm totally with you, Maria. Let's flip this conversation around on its head, and we're going to need to do some training, and we're going to talk about how do we have this conversation so that we're not trying to tell people that we're not comparing ourselves to others. That's just for us internally. We're going to change the external conversation. I think that's action steps.
Cool. You want to take a break here?
Let's do it. Let's take a break, and then we'll come back and do it. All right. Let's get into some action steps. So you were already keying up a little bit on how we would talk about it. I think you and I are in agreement. I do not want to spend a lot of time on the phone having a conversation about what other people charge. And I really don't want to spend a lot of times talking about my prices. That doesn't mean I won't share the prices, but the whole debate about what I charge is not productive because I'm not changing my prices. You know what I mean? And at some point I want to be empathetic, but also this is what it is. And if the person needs to go somewhere else, then they need to go somewhere else. And if they're like, no one else will do this, well, there's a reason for that. Like, you have to lower your prices because no one else's prices are as low as I want them to be. I'm sorry. That does not make any sense.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, I wholeheartedly agree. I think this comes down to coaching your individual, and and getting them the tools that they need in order to have this conversation. And I think that's where we're at here. And there's a lot of different tools that I think we could have here. But when we're starting to have this conversation, one of the key things here is that I don't want to go to this receptionist and be like, you don't talk about our prices, or you're terrible with clients. You don't talk about our prices, right? Like we need to come to this conversation in a great way. And I always like starting with the fact that, hey, I really enjoy the way that you communicate with clients. Most of the ways that you have these conversations, you're very empathetic, and I love that. I sometimes feel your empathy with the prices can kind of devalue us when you're, agreeing that they're very expensive. And I want to make sure that we understand. Do you feel that our prices are expensive? Like, should we talk about that at all? Just opening up the conversation, because if this person really does feel that our prices are too expensive because they worked somewhere else, we got to talk about why they feel that way. And we got to try and change that conversation into a more productive way of being like, well, let's talk about that because I want to be transparent with you and I want you to see the value in our services and really talk about why it is that you charge the way that you do. You said you're mobile, so I'm sure there's probably travel time. Is the receptionist seeing the travel time in between that you have to charge? Is the convenience of going to someone's door versus them coming to you? Like, all of these things are the things that make your practice unique and the reason why you charge for the services that you do charge. Your receptionist needs to be able to also relay it in a way that's professional to clients. But first, we need to get that understanding. So hopefully we've gotten there. We've got that part. You're in that coaching.
Yeah. I like your idea of having the conversation with them. I don't want this to feel like something punitive, right?
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
not helpful. I think sort of the two ways to do this, and you can go either way, I think. It depends on the person you're talking to. You can either go conversationally, and I would say something like, hey, so I heard you on the phone earlier sort of talking about the prices and everything. Why do you think that our prices are set the way they are relative to the other practices? Why do you think our prices are higher? I like that as an opening, because then they might be like, well, it's because we do this, 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 and I really love that we do this. And I go, great. Or they might be like, I have no idea. At least I now have some understanding of where this person is. If I sit down and just start saying, well, we do this and we do this and we do this, it might not be the problem at all that they don't understand what our prices are. They're just soft-hearted, and maybe they remember being young and their family struggled, to pay, for their horses. And I mean, horses are expensive. And so she might be someone who was like, when I was a kid, I couldn't have horses because we couldn't afford them, or I had a horse that we weren't able to take care of. And, I don't know, but I don't want to lecture at this person ideally until I at least try to figure out where's your head in this? Are you 100% with us? Like, it's possible she's like, I agree. I think that this is an incredible value. In fact, I would think that we would charge more than we charge. It's just that, I do understand that people don't have money and times are tough, and that's hard on me. I go, great. Versus, I have no idea why we charge more than the other practices do. It's a good starting place for that conversation. And so I think that that's really key. I think that the things that I would say is, hey, we can empathize with people and their frustration, and we can understand where they're coming from without apologizing for our prices. And then I would say why I don't want to apologize for prices. And you can kind of go through the exercise too. You say like, well, what bothers you about this? Why do you think that's bad? And I think this person did a good job of saying, I feel like it's degrading to the value that we offer. I was like, that's great. I would think about how to say that and how that sounds, but I would be able to say, I don't like us apologizing for our prices. Because to me, it feels this way. Do you agree? And I would do all these things step by step to see where they are. Because if I lose them at some point, I want to know where I lost them. So I feel this way. Do you agree with that? Does it make sense why I don't want us to apologize for our prices? And I would make the point that we can still empathize and we can still, want to support people and be kind to them without apologizing for what we charge, because we have to charge what we're charging. And so I would sort of walk them that. And then the last thing is I would say, it's really important that we talk about what we can do rather than what we can't do. And it's really important that we talk about the value that we bring over the costs that we have. Does that make sense? And I would walk them up to that point and make sure that they're on board.
Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more on all of those pieces. I think that this is a very delicate conversation to have, but I don't think it ends with just the conversation. I do think that it requires some coaching. Is what you're going to find is there's some sort of discomfort here, clearly. If they're saying, if they're apologizing for the prices, maybe they do really feel badly that they're charging somebody for this. Maybe they are just trying to be on the side of the client, right? Like they don't want to get yelled at because of the prices. It's happened to me. How many of us have gotten yelled at before because of the prices of something? Yeah. But I think this is where I turn it into that, hey, I want to grow you. I want to make sure you feel confident and comfortable having these conversations. Would you be interested in doing some training with me? We can kind of practice back and forth. I'll show you what I say, and we can get to it. And so the main idea here being that I'm going to try and train this person and coach them in a way that's going to help them explain the value that we have. Because I don't think we do a great service of this in veterinary medicine. Oftentimes it's very much, hey, let's go to the front desk. Let's train you on what you're doing. Go ahead and pick up the phone call. But I will tell you, one of the best things that I did in my practice was, for the first week, I think it's actually 2 weeks, a total of 2 weeks, was all just orientation. And it didn't matter if they were a veterinary assistant or a veterinary technician. Part of it was learning what their role was in the practice, but the other part was actually role playing. How do we explain an estimate for a preventative care exam, for a dental? How do we go over and explain what our protocols are for wellness? Because if I had people coming in from other clinics, they sometimes didn't have lepto as a core vaccine, but my clinic did. And so I needed them to be able to explain, why is lepto a core vaccine? Or why is your spay $100 more than the place right down the street? We need to let them be in that space where they can practice those conversations in a controlled environment where they're not going to get yelled at. And so that is what I would tell my team too, is like, I'm trying to prepare you, because once you're out there, and I will tell you, it hurts. And I would tell them this story, so you can feel free to take this story if you need to. But essentially, I would tell them my rhinotracheatis calici panleukopenia story, which I think I've told you, my RSV vaccine story. Essentially, it was one of my first weeks as a receptionist, and I was going over a wellness estimate with a client. And it was just for your standard cat. We're going to do a wellness exam, RCP vaccine. And I'm going through, and they're like, wait. Why do they need that vaccine? And I was like, oh, that's a core vaccine, recommended on all cats, regardless of lifestyle. I'm thinking I'm doing a great job. And they're like, no, but what is it? And I was like, oh, it's kind of like the distemper vaccine, but for cats, like all cats need it. They're like, no. But what virus is it protecting them against? And I clamped up because I didn't know the answer to that exactly, right? I knew it was a really long word, but I didn't know what the actual word was. And so I was like, and before I could even get let me find out for you, the client started yelling at me, well, if you can't tell me what it is, and why would you be making this recommendation then? If you don't even know what the virus is, how are you going to know that my cat even needs it? Is the doctor going to tell me? And I started like getting yelled. I was like, totally understand. And a client ended up not signing that estimate. And they're like, oh, I'll talk to the doctor about what my cat needs. And I was like, okay, totally. And I went home crying that day, because it was like the client did not end up getting that RCP vaccine. And I felt like it was totally my fault, because I fumbled the bag on what this was. I was crying, and my fiance at the time was just like, I totally understand you have a lot of learning to do in veterinary medicine. Why does that upset you? Like, you love to learn. And I was like, yeah, but no one is going to teach me these things. Like, I've been trying to, and like, who's going to teach me? And he's like, Maria, when have you ever needed somebody to teach you anything? Yeah. And I was like, I guess you're right. And he's like, you better go practice whatever that RCP vaccine is. And I was like, yes, you're right. And so every day
and read about it.
That's exactly what I did. Andy. So the next day I get to the clinic, and I'm walking around my practice. I go to the fridge and I see what it is. And I'm walking around the practice basically just saying it out loud. Rhinotracheatis calici panleukopenia. Until it came out flowing perfectly, right? And then about 3 to 4 months later, my moment of glory finally came when a client was like, hey, what is this vaccine for, though? And I was like, oh, it actually protects.
Like push someone out of the way, like knocking a lady down in her walker, like, that's me.
Finally. I could tell you. And so I finally, without stumbling, without goofing up, I was like, oh, it's a core vaccine recommend on all cats, protects them against rhinotracheatis calici panleukopenia. You're going to definitely want it on your cat. And the client was like, oh, yeah, totally. This person knows exactly what she's talking about.
If you'll take a look at my slide presentation here, I'm just going to walk you through this.
No, that confidence made such a big difference that second time around, because I didn't fumble, I didn't get nervous, and the client like immediately was like, oh, yeah, totally, okay. And then they signed on the estimate. Yeah. That's the level of confidence that you need for your team members. They need to be able to explain the things so naturally that it's, they're not fumbling, they're not stumbling. They only get that kind of practice when they're doing it over and over again. And if you're waiting until they have that conversation over and over again in the clinic, you're going to have them fumble a little bit. And so that's when I learned, like, we need to practice these things out ahead of time. And I'll tell you right now, there's a CVPM exam question for if you want to become a certified veterinary practice manager. It's going to ask you what is the number one way to train your team in the veterinary clinics, and the answer is role play. Yeah. And it's important because role play is going to be one of the most effective ways to get these communication practice out. I mean, my brother literally works in sales. They do what they call pitch practice every day for like 2 hours before they even get on the phones. And it's because they need to be able to have what they're going to say in a confident way that they're able to explain it. And this is no different. This is price shopping. It's not quite sales. And I don't want you to think of it that way, but it is explaining the price or the cost of your practice. They should not be doing that for the first time with a client. They should be doing it with you in a controlled setting where you can coach them and you can guide them. And I will say, like, some people hate scripts, but I actually really like it in the beginning, and I set it up with that in mind, telling them that I don't want you to follow this script and read off of this script word for word. This is here to help guide you on how to explain our AHA accreditation, right? Because that's a big mouthful. So if I tell a client like, oh, we're, our cost of our services are a little bit higher because we're accredited by the American Animal Hospital Association, that means nothing to the client. They have no idea what that is. They're probably like, oh, isn't every clinic AHA accredited? And so being able to say, have your receptionist practice something like, oh, we're one of the 15% of animal hospitals in the entire nation that is accredited by the American Animal Hospital Association. And what that means is we hold ourselves to a different standard, some of those standards including a brand new endotracheal tube, an intravenous catheter that's going to stay in place all day, surgery monitoring during the surgery and after, nerve blocks, all of these things. They're going to have to be able to explain those things. But a lot of times, if we don't practice those things, we can't explain them with confidence. And so I really think that this is where some of the training needs to happen, and some of the coaching is some of that practice in really building the value of your clinic and why the prices are set the way that they are. And I think you've got a great course too, Andy, on angry clients even, that is a lot of practice, isn't it? The Charming the Angry Client.
Charming the Angry Client, yeah. Yeah, that's over at drandyrort.com, yeah. Yeah, that's a great course for this. It's funny, I like that you go this way with it. I said at the beginning, I was like, there's two ways to approach this, and I said the first is sort of conversational, and then the second one is developmental. It is just to say, like, it's like maybe we're not even going to talk about frustrations we've had in the past, but we're going to say, yeah, look, I want us to work on our phone skills and our price shopping skills. And it's not that you've been doing it wrong, but it's more, let's focus in on this and how we want to grow and how we want to develop and how we want to do it. And so I think you're 100% spot on. I don't think that there is a generic script. I think a generic script is going to make you feel terrible. I really like your idea of either having a script that the person can kind of just get used to and then improvise on, or having some bullet point wording things that are going to help people just sort of get the conversation going, or common sticking points. But I really think it can just start with, hey, I don't like to call it role play. I think it really freaks people out. But we say, let's practice how we do these phone calls. And I call it practicing. And so let's practice how we do these phone calls. And
we called it drills in my practice. We'd be like,
drills,
you want to do a communication drill real quick on this? And it literally was practice the communication out. Yeah. Yeah,
totally. I think the other part of this is I would look at sort of phone training holistically and not just about price. Because otherwise they kind of fumble around and everything, and they're kind of they're prepared only for when the person asks about price. And I would say we need to talk to them about, before the person asks anything about what it costs, we need to talk about educating on value. And I just think that that's really important of, like, let's practice this. I'm just going to call and I'm going to ask what this service costs, or say I'm thinking about getting it and ask how you do it. Go ahead and just, I'll ask you the question and you're going to just respond to it. And then just go back and just let them practice and kind of ask them some questions. Have them try it different ways. Change your question up a couple different ways. Things like that. Just mostly to kind of see what their knowledge is and just sort of kind of poke gently. But mostly it's to help you come up with some sort of a training program, whether it's formal or informal, around the value of our services and what we do and why we do it. Then for the handling any sort of pricing questions or pricing complaints, there's a couple of different phrases that I really like, we sort of work with. And so I would say something around the lines of, like, I understand our prices may be different from what you're used to, but we offer blank. That's because we, and then go into your value proposition. I like that a lot. And, while our prices might be higher, it's because we focus on blank, and then just go back into that. We provide detailed estimates so you can see everything that we're doing up front, and we can have conversations about what the prices will be. We offer various payment options to help make sure that our clients can get what they need. And a couple of little phrases like that can be really good and useful for helping them when they start to feel pressed and sort of pushed into a corner. But really sort of kicking those things around and practicing them a little bit. And here's the other thing too, and this might sound silly, let them be the caller and you respond and take turns doing it. And there might be some stuff that they'll do that's better than what you do, and there's stuff you'll do that's better than what they do. And the biggest thing is you can sort of teach in a peer mentor way, as opposed to, I'm going to train you how to do this. And also, there's no training manual, and we have no SOPs, and it's just the two of us. And, all of this might change in the future. Forget it. Just go ahead. Just work with them a little bit. Help them understand why you don't like to feel like you're apologizing, and then give them the tools to frame what you do in terms of the value, and give them some tools to redirect and say, our prices are higher maybe than what you've seen elsewhere. That's because blank, blank, and blank. And if somebody goes, well, I don't want blank, blank, and blank, you can say, well, I understand that is what we do.
Well, and that's exactly how we would run those, because I think when you practice going back and forth being the client, you also get a good insight into what they're hearing over the phone. Like what kind of concerns are coming from the client, or what they're almost fearful to hear about, because they'll get really into it and they'll get really fun. And I'm a really big fan of doing these in a getting harder, significantly harder each time. So the first time we do this role play, I'm going to go through the estimate with you, but I'm going to be a really easy client. And then the second time, I'm going to push back a little bit harder. I'm going to ask you some questions. The third time, I'm going to push back even harder, and I'm going to start to get upset about the price. Then the fourth time, I'm going to be that unreasonable, because they don't come often, but they're there, that unreasonable client that's like, well, you should be cheaper. So that you can slowly get easier to harder, and you'll be well equipped by the time you're answering that phone with other people. So I'm a big fan of those things. The other thing that I will say too is that oftentimes when we're talking about pricing and these situations, some of that apologizing, some of that is because we genuinely feel guilty if we cannot help a pet in need because of the prices. Right. And so if your clinic can offer something so that, because it's not about what you can't do, it's about what you can do, right? We talked about that. Mm-hmm. So if your prices are an issue, do you have them set up with tools like Care Credit, Vet Billing, Scratch Pay, all of those payment options that are going to help the client? And if you still have a client that I really can't afford any of this, I can't take out any credit, I can't do this, do you have a one-page handout of maybe the nonprofits that help people pay vet bills that they can still give to the owner? Because again, we don't have the time to have all of these conversations over and over again. But if this client can't afford your services and they still have an animal in need, we should try and do the kindest thing we can, even if that is our services might not be for you. If you're looking for the discount clinic, or if you're looking for help on your veterinary bills, here's a list of organizations, whether it's your own angel fund, other angel funds that help pay those bills. But this way, at least you're helping your team, because I'm sorry, it is very emotionally draining when you are a receptionist and you do have to tell multiple clients in one day, hey, these are our prices and we can't help you because you can't afford it. Like it's an emotionally draining thing, you know?
Yeah. I think that's a really good point. I love those extra resources. I think that's all I got for action steps. How about you?
Yeah, me too. That's it.
Awesome. Well, thanks for talking through this with me, Maria. I really appreciate it. Guys, thanks for tuning in, everybody. I hope this was helpful. Take care of yourselves, gang. And that's it, guys. Thanks for being here. I hope you enjoyed it. If you've got a question for us at Uncharted, shoot me an email at the mailbag. It's podcast@unchartedvet.com. That's podcast@unchartedvet.com. If you're interested in the course we mentioned earlier, I have a Charming the Angry Client course. It is a mega super best-selling course. It is at drandywork.com. And also, we've got our conflict management certificate through Uncharted. If you're an Uncharted member, you get that for free. If you just want the certificate and you don't want to be an Uncharted member, then you can purchase it through Vetfolio. Our friends over at NAVC have it housed over there. So anyway, that's it. Gang, take care of yourselves, everybody. I'll talk to you later.